Welcome back. This is the second episode of our rhythm tutorial series and this is going to be about beats and offbeats. Also another very basic tutorial. If you're familiar with this, you probably want to jump ahead, but I want to make sure we all have the same vocabulary before we get into the actual rhythm things. So in the first tutorial we have already discussed what the beat is and what the bars are, which are groups of the beat. So like if I have a 4/4 time, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And the music will unfold on top of this basic grid of 4 beats to each bar. Now, we do not only group the beats into bars, we also subdivide the beats. We create subdivisions, and the easiest subdivision to do would be to do 2 subdivisions per beat. Let's say I clap the subdivisions, then it would sound like this. Let me slow this down. I'm now doing 2 claps for each step. Very easy, very simple. And I'm just going to say some things that you can already see, but I'm going to say them out loud so that we are aware of them. In this particular grid, in this pattern of a subdivision of 2 claps per step, I have one of the claps exactly on the step, which is this one. Right? Those are exactly on the beat. And then I have the other one, the second one, exactly in between the steps. Right? If you try and do this, you will hopefully notice that it feels very different to be clapping exactly in between the steps or exactly on the step. It's a very different feeling inside, and this is what it's all about. It's all about learning what this feels like internally so that later we can create tension and release using these different feelings. But back to the theory, if I put these 2 together, the clap on the step and the clap right in between, the total is this. Okay, so I have now subdivided the beat into 2 claps each. And obviously I could also be singing this subdivision or playing it with an instrument or tap dancing it. This is just for a matter of explaining it now that I'm using the claps. If I wanted to indicate this in my nice little graph here, I would say I subdivided. I'm going to use those green little dots here. I hope they can be seen on the video. I have twice as many green dots now as blue circles. This is my subdivision in 2. Music theory language, if you want, would call these the 8th notes. And this is just to give a relative name to the note values. If you remember, we called the beats the quarter notes. And that is not some law of nature. This is just a convention. This is something that we decide to call it. We could also call it something different, and there are different ways of calling it. But for the matter of keeping it simple now, we're calling the beat the quarter notes, and the music symbol for a quarter note is this. And we have 4 quarter notes in 1 bar in the 4/4 time. And consequently, we have 8 notes to the same bar, and the music notation symbol for that would be this. it's called in English. This would be the music notation symbol for an eighth note. If we wanted to count this grid now, it'll be the most conventional way of doing that is to call it and. 1 and, 2 and. Okay? So I'm just going to write this little plus symbol in between the beats, and that will indicate the position of the clap in between the steps. So counting the same thing that I've just been dancing would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and etc. Now as far as the vocabulary is concerned, it's very simple. We already know that the steps, the circles here are called the beat. Maybe I do it like this. These are called the beat. And the ones in between would then be called the offbeat. Very, very simple. Maybe it's a little bit confusing now on the whiteboard here, but those would be the offbeats. Okay. All of what we will be doing when we get to interesting rhythms is about beats and offbeats. Like it's lifelong joy to explore the powers of beats and offbeats. I cannot start talking about it now because then this video will be endless, but it's important to understand the basic concept. Now, let's listen to a groove that would traditionally be in this sort of a grid of an eighth note pulse. For example, a bossa nova rhythm is usually in this type of beat and offbeat. It may sound like this. Okay. First of all, we need to find the beat. This will be here. This is my beat. Then I need to find the one. It's here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I want to find the subdivision, and it'll be here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Etc. If you find it confusing to identify the one in this audio example, don't let that bother you. This is just a groove loop, and with experience you will find it much easier to identify the one. And for now I'm just saying it out loud in the music. Okay, I need to hurry up because this is getting too long. Obviously, while the beat is always defined, it's always on the step, there can be many offbeats. As many claps as I can place in between those steps could be as many offbeats as I can be able to do, right? But in real life, we do not have an endless arsenal of subdivisions. We usually have subdivisions in 2, or in 3, or in 4. That covers like 95% of all that's happening in music. And I can already hear the experts say that this is not true, and yes, there's lots of exceptions, but for keeping it basic, we will only deal with subdivisions in 2, in 3, and in 4. This has been we have now subdivided the beat into 2. Now let's look what happens if we subdivide it into 3. We have the same pulse, the same beat. It stays in the same place. And it's really important to not get confused. We're not changing the beat. We're not changing the bar either. It's still in 4/4 time. So everything that used to be a 1 is going to stay a 1. Everything that used to be a 2 is going to stay a 2. All of that is not changing. The only thing that is changing is the subdivision. I subdivided above in 2, but now I'm going to subdivide into 3. So I'm going to try and draw it nicely and evenly. So it's a correct graphic representation, roughly, etc., etc. It goes on like this. So now I have always 3 subdivisions per beat, per step. And that will sound like this. To compare, before, it sounded like this. Before I was counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Whereas now I have it's a whole different feeling. If I wanted to count this, the most common way that I know of to count this would be 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... If I slow this down again, I can see that again there's the one clap on the step stays the same. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... But now I have 2 offbeats, 2 claps in between the steps. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and etc. Okay, so where are my pins? I would now add a plus and the letter A to indicate this way of counting. And we call this the 8th notes. And this subdivision, we would call it the triplets, or to be more precise, the 8th note triplets. I don't need to be too theoretical about this, but the music notation symbol would be similar to the symbol of the 8th notes, but to make sure it's clear that this is now 3 over the duration of 1 beat, there's a small 3 on top of this line here. Okay, so this is what we call a triplet subdivision, triplet grid. It's really important, I think, in my experience, if we talk to the musicians or play with the band, that we're familiar with the terms 8th notes and triplets, because it's such a fundamental difference in the music. Also, one short remark, the musicians will not usually count from 1 to 8. Right? They will usually think of this as one bar, and they will go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Whereas the dancers many times take 2 of those bars into one unit and count from 1 to 8, which makes sense for a lot of the dance world, but to the musicians it's very confusing. So, for the sake of better communication with the musicians, I prefer to count from 1 to 4. But that's a side note. So, let's see, maybe, for example, this swing groove here. I have the quarter notes, my beat is right here, and then I have to identify the 1, and that'll be here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty fast to clap the triplets now, but they will be here. It's a bit fast to be clapping like that, so maybe you want to take it slower in the beginning, but that's what the theory is. The last subdivision that we need to cover would be the 16th notes. And you can already guess the beats, as always, stay in the same place. I'm not drawing it nicely here, yes. These should all have the same distance. Because it's a steady tempo, it's always the same distance. Now we have the same 8th note as we had in the very beginning, when we subdivided the beat into 2. But in between of those, we have another subdivision. So that now, to each step that we do, we have 4 subdivisions. And just like we call these the 8th notes, now we have twice as many in the bar, not 8 anymore, but 16. So each single one of them is called a 16th note, and the music notation symbol would be this, now with 2 of those lines here. Okay? And you probably are familiar with this. To count, obviously the beats stay the same, they're always called the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the subdivisions are now called 1 E and 2 E and a 3 E and etc. My native language is German. You maybe in the US or in English you would write this differently. In German I would write the letter I. Maybe you use an E, I don't know, but I'm sure you're familiar with the sound. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and that is usually indicating the 16th note subdivision. If I do it very slowly, I'm choosing a very slow beat now so that we can all follow along. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm subdividing. 4 claps to each step. I will be counting 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and in fact I'm going to slow this down even more. This is very slow motion now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this would be a subdivision that you find a lot in funky music and many other musical styles. So these are the 16th notes. This is all about the basic subdivisions. Remember that everything that happens in between the beats we call the offbeats. In the 8th note grid, there's only one offbeat to each beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In the triplet grid, there's 2 offbeats in between those beats. We already have more options now to do like crazy things with. And in the 16th note pattern, we have 3 offbeats to each beat, which gives us a lot of more possibilities to create tension and release, and we will explore those later. I hope this was understandable, and see you at the next episode.